Whoa, 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 bop.
What's up YouTube? Chris Bandy here. In this series, I'm going to show you how to understand jazz harmony. This tutorial focuses on harmonic features, analysis, and labeling. It does not focus on progressions or performance techniques, although I might make tutorials for those concepts later on. In addition, I teach jazz piano, theory, and composition lessons in person and online, so email me if you are interested. If you have any questions about this video, please check the description before commenting. Thanks to the Coldest Water Bottle Company for sponsoring this series. This 21-ounce sports bottle is solid and sturdy, keeps your drinks cold, floats on water so you don't lose it, has a rubber grip and a handle, is odor resistant, and fits in basically all cup holders. It has been perfect for me every time I go out of the house, and they have 12 different bottle types and a bunch of other products. The brand has over 8,000 5-star reviews, and they offer full refunds if you aren't satisfied. Pick up a Coldest Water bottle today by clicking the link in the description, and use the promo code BANDY to get 10% off your entire order. Alright, let's get into the series. There is a difference between description and prescription. Description is writing down a chord symbol in order to describe a chord that you already have. For example, if you see the tones C, E flat, G, B flat, D, F, A, you can describe the root, extensions, alterations, and bass of that chord with the chord symbol C minor 13. When you are describing a 7th chord and you're trying to save space on the page, you don't have to indicate an omitted 5, 9, or 11 if you don't want to. So the chord symbol C minor 13 works just fine if the 5, 9, or 11 is missing. But if you want, you can be more specific and say C minor 13, no 5, C minor 13, no 9, or C minor 13, no 11. On the other hand, prescription is writing down a chord symbol in order to prescribe for someone what they should play. Similar to before, if a jazz musician sees the chord symbol C minor 13, he will not necessarily play both the natural 9 and the natural 11. He might not always play the natural 5 either. He should, however, play the natural 13. Nowadays, jazz keyboardists and guitarists will include the 9 and 13 on regular 7th chords, unless you tell them not to. They might even replace the 5 with the 13. For example, if you give me the chord C7, I will most likely play C13, including the natural 13 and natural 9. I might even add the sharp 11, or even replace the 5 with the sharp 11. If you don't want your performer to do any of these things, you could write something like, follow chord symbols strictly, no extra tones. One thing that we probably won't do is add the natural 13 on a chord that has the sharp 5. If you want both the sharp 5 and natural 13, you just need to write both of them in the chord symbol. For example, D13 sharp 5, D augmented 13, or D augmented 13 using the plus symbol. As stated earlier, the first option here is the clearest, and should be preferred when you are prescribing for someone what they should play. If you are describing a chord that is already there, and you want to use the option that takes up the least space on the page, then you can use the third option here. And as always, if you want something specific, just write out the exact notes for the player. Let's talk about altered chords. In classical theory, an altered chord is just any chord that has altered tones. But in jazz theory, an altered chord is specifically a dominant 7th chord with altered tones, but with no natural 5, 9, 11, or 13. So for example, C7 sharp 9 sharp 5 is an altered chord. E flat 7 flat 13 sharp 11 is also an altered chord. If you want a performer to play just any type of altered chord, but you don't care about the specific tones, you can just write the root and then 7 alt. For example, F7 alt tells the performer to play F7 with at least one altered tone, but with no natural 5, 9, 11, or 13. Most likely, the performer will include both an altered 5 and an altered 9, since doing so really gives the chord an altered flavor. An important thing to know about chords is the scales that they come from. Some of the chords I show here will be very detailed, because I want to show how a normal scale can contain a detailed chord. For example, the whole half diminished scale contains all the tones of a diminished major 11 flat 13 add 6 chord. But this means that the whole half diminished scale also contains all the tones of a regular old diminished major 7 chord, since all we've done is remove tones from that chord. In other words, once you know that a certain chord fits into a certain scale, then if you just remove tones from that chord, it will still fit into the same scale. With this in mind, let's get into some chord-scale relationships. The major pentatonic scale contains all the tones of a major 6-9 chord. The minor pentatonic scale contains all the tones of a minor 7 add 4 chord. The Ionian scale contains all the tones of a major 13 add 4 chord. The Mixolydian scale contains all the tones of a dominant 13 add 4 chord. The Lydian scale contains all the tones of a major 13 sharp 11 chord. The Dorian scale contains all the tones of a minor 13 chord. The Aeolian scale contains all the tones of a minor 11 flat 13 chord. The Phrygian scale contains all the tones of a minor 11 flat 13 flat 9 chord. The Lydian dominant scale contains all the tones of a dominant 13 sharp 11 chord. The melodic minor scale contains all the tones of a minor major 13 chord. The harmonic minor scale contains all the tones of a minor major 11 flat 13 chord. The half-whole diminished scale contains all the tones of a dominant 13 sharp 11 sharp 9 flat 9 chord. The whole half diminished scale contains all the tones of a fully diminished 11 flat 13 add major 7 chord, which is identical to a diminished major 11 flat 13 add 6 chord. And as we saw earlier, we can abbreviate this chord as simply a fully diminished 13 chord. The whole tone scale contains all the tones of a dominant 9 sharp 11 sharp 5 chord, which is also an augmented 9 sharp 11 chord. The altered scale contains all the tones of an altered chord. The Locrian scale contains all the tones of a half diminished 11 flat 13 flat 9 chord, which is also a minor 11 flat 13 flat 9 flat 5 chord. The Locrian sharp 2 scale contains all the tones of a half diminished 11 flat 13 chord, which is also a minor 11 flat 13 flat 5 chord. The half diminished scale contains all the tones of a half diminished 13 chord, which is also a minor 13 flat 5 chord.